Good morning, everybody. I toast to you and all you do. I hope you're having a fantastic day. I'm out here on the farm. It snowed last night, so I can't sit down. That's okay. We'll just do the video standing. Um, I was excited. My kids wanted to build snowmen, but there's not enough snow. As you can see behind me, it's just like a light dusting. They were very disappointed this morning. They were like, no, there will be no snowmen. But anyways, so we are here today for our introspective journey. It is day 4. And today's question is a little deeper than the questions that we've had so far because this is one that can cause a lot of stress in our life. So the question for today is, how often do I spend thinking about the past? And I'm sorry for the traffic. I tried to get away from the street, but because it's like a valley, it seems like the further away I get, the louder it gets. So hopefully the microphone is doing its thing and we're not getting too much of that background noise. I'm sure we are. Anyways, so back to our introspective question. How much time do you spend thinking about the past? Now, the reason this question is a little deeper than the other questions is because of the psychological thing that happens when we start thinking about the past. When you remind yourself of things that happened, happy or sad, so it can go both ways. But when we think about those things, we bring up the same stress hormones. We bring up the same feelings. We bring up the same anxiety and stress that we had in that moment. It might not be as grand because we don't have that influence, but it still brings up that same thing. So you think about like a joyous occasion, like when I had my children and I think about that moment, it brings up really happy endorphins. It reminds me of how much I love being a parent. And so I think about that when I'm really stressed out with my kids. I'm like, oh, go back to those happy moments. And they didn't talk. I'm just kidding. Just a little. But it's also can be really stressful. I mean, we think about stressful times that we had when we were young, and especially when they are brought up because of a current situation that is reminding us of them, it can really bring up all of those stress again. And then you get put back into that place, that mindset, those feelings that you were in that moment. And even though it's not happening now, we find we just keep reliving it. We keep refeeling it. We keep redoing it. And you get stuck in this cycle. And that's where being in the past can kind of be detrimental to our health. I know personally, I've got some pretty traumatic things that happened when I was a kid, even recently with my mom dying and all of that. Even just thinking about that right now, it really brings up this traumatic moment for me because my mom overdosed at her office and we had to clean up the mess. We had to clean out all the furniture, I had to clean the carpet, and it's one of those situations you just can't describe your feelings. And so as I think about it, it brings up that same stress. And it can be uncomfortable in the nicest way, I guess. But as we relive those moments, it can be stressful. It brings up those same things. It makes you uncomfortable in the present place where you are. And so as you answer this question, and you think about, well, I do spend some time thinking about the past. I spend some time thinking about these traumas. I spend some time thinking about what I could have done differently. And that's actually one of like the downfalls. Like we think that that's going to help us. We think that if I think back to the past and what I could have done differently, that then I'll feel better now. But in reality, all that does is like puts like a negative Nancy in there, Debbie Downer. Because you get upset with yourself. Like, I could have done a better job. I could have done this differently. I could have changed this and the outcome would have been different. And when you begin to blame yourself, especially for situations that were outside your control. I know that I talk a lot about you are the only person that can control your reaction to a situation, but that's it. It's just your reaction. You can't control what other people do, and you can't control the world around you. So when you think back, like, what could I have done differently? You're assuming a responsibility that is not that is not your own, and you are taking on this burden of trying to fix something that already happened, that you can't go back in time, and you can't change the actions of other people. So when you relive it, you just bring that back to yourself. You just remind yourself of that. In essence, failure. And that's stressful. That's, I don't know anybody who is not stressed out by failure. I really do take failure as first attempt at learning, first attempt in learning. Um, but it's still frustrating. It's frustrating to fail. That's why you're motivated to try again and to do it different. And so if you find that you're stuck in these situations where you're constantly rethinking something, you have to stop. You have to step outside that thought. You have to remind yourself, one, I cannot change the past. Cannot control other people's actions. All I can do is make sure that in the future, I do what I need to do in order to make sure that doesn't happen again. And, for some situations, that's fairly straightforward. If you're in an abusive relationship or had been in an abusive relationship and you get out of that relationship, you just make sure you don't go back to it. And I know that's way easier said than done. But that's just the reminder that you have to make to yourself. Every time you come back to that thought of like, well, what did I do, or how could I have done that differently? You have to say, no, what am I going to do different in the future? And adjust that mindset. Think about proper coping skills. I have anxiety about not being enough and not doing a good enough job. And I just have to remind myself that, one, I have very high standards. And so whenever I think that and I'm like, oh, I didn't do a good job, I'll stop, Tara. You have really high standards, and however it might not be perfect, you can see that you did the best that you can do and know that next time you can do better. And that's it. And just move forward and not get caught up in that cycle of negative self-talk. Because when we start thinking about the past and thinking about what could I have done differently, it brings up that negative self-talk. Because again, you're taking responsibility in a situation that was not necessarily in your control. Now, there are situations that are in our control where I made a bad choice. I chose to do this thing and it did not work out in my favor. When I was 13, I chose to stay out all night, hang out with homeless people, and it was not a good choice. And so I can accept that responsibility. I can say, that was a really unsafe choice. And however, I was okay, nothing bad really happened. It could have been a lot worse. 2 weeks later, the same people that I was hanging out with were getting high and beating up homeless people to death. Like, it was not a safe place. And so, looking back on that situation, I can say, don't put yourself in that situation ever again, and make better choices next time. But when it comes to something that's outside your control, you just know that I need to react in a certain way. I can't let these stresses dictate my whole life, and I have to be able to move forward. And that's really easy to say. It's really easy to say, like, we're all just going to move forward and it's all going to be great. We don't have to dwell on the past anymore. But the only way that that actually changes is if you start saying that to yourself. You have to make the change. You have to change your perspective. Like I said, you have to step out of that memory. You have to step aside from it and see it and be like, hey, there's that memory. And that's what happened. And I learned this, this, and this. I learned that I don't like that. I learned that I do like that. When I'm talking about negative memories, we don't often find ourselves stuck in these happy memories. I see some people who just kind of flutter through life in these happy moments and they just focus on the happy things. And that can also be detrimental because you're not learning from your lessons. If all you focus on is the positive and the successes, then you're not learning from your mistakes. So you need to see those mistakes so that you can learn from them. But it becomes like a dwelling thing, when you just get stuck in that cycle of feelings and continue to relive it over and over and over again. And you have to find different ways to feel better. For me personally, when I start getting too caught up in my traumatic childhood and the things that happened in the past, I watch I watch this coffee house, what is he called? Coffee house horror or something like that. Coffee house crime. That's what it is. And he just tells crime stories of really horrible people. And it makes me feel better because I see that other people had it worse than I did. And I am then thankful for the things that I do have and the successes that I have found. And it helps me to change that mindset. Now, that's not going to work for everybody. I know some people, they're like, how can you watch those crime dramas all day long? Like, doesn't that just put you in an awful mood? And I'm like, no. Most of them have an end, like a conclusion where the bad guy went to jail and success, there was justice found in the situation. Some great things do come out of some of them. There's some great charity organizations, there's some great support groups, there's different things that happen out of that. And so there is some good that can come out of bad situations. But like I said, for me, it just helps me to see that I'm not alone. Other people have bad things that have happened to them in their past. And it is really enlightening to see, like rape victims or child abuse victims who grow up to then become these great people who help the community and support the people around them and stop that violence from happening to other people. They didn't get there in a good way, but what they're doing is a good thing. And we need people who have the strength to stand up and say, I'm going to fight against these evils. And the sad thing is sometimes you have to go through that in order to understand and to be motivated to do that. But we do need that in our society. We need people who are strong enough and capable enough to help stop the bad guys, to help stop the cycles of abuse, to help, put an end to this. And so there are some good things that come out of it. And that's just, how I change my mindset. I listen to music. That helps me to change my mindset most of the time. Pretty much all the time. Just not necessarily. Sometimes I get into like weird places, like weird thought patterns. It's great for meditation. It helps me to kind of see things from a different perspective. But so you just have to find those ways to get out of that cycle, that mindset. Think about healthy coping mechanisms. If you are a victim of abuse, what are the things that you can do now to make yourself feel better? Positive affirmations go a long way. If you get up and you tell yourself every day, I'm strong, I'm beautiful, and I'm capable of doing the things that I need to get done without the support of other people, that can be a very powerful mantra for someone who has been abused, because you feel like you can't. You feel like you don't have the strength. You've been told for so long that you're not enough, that it's not good, that you're worthless, and you begin to live that. So if you come out of that situation and instead of just reminding yourself of like, wow, I let myself be in this really bad relationship and I let this person do these things to me, you're just going to end up in that same cycle. And the unfortunate thing of that is that you end up being in that relationship again. I just watched this documentary about a woman who was abused her whole childhood. And then she grew up to be in a relationship where she was yet again abused. She ended up shooting her husband, and unfortunately going to jail, which was really frustrating. But you, you end up in that cycle because it becomes normal for you. And that's a very sad cycle to be in. It's very hard to get out of that cycle. It's really hard to put your self-worth above what you think other people think of you. And so just to say to yourself, I am beautiful, I am strong, and I am capable. You say that every day in the mirror with conviction, you will begin to believe it. Your mind is a very powerful thing. And again, why this living in the past and rethinking and rehashing and going back to it over and over and over again can be so detrimental. I can remember my mom telling me when I was a little kid, if you think you're going to die, then you'll die. Even in the worst situations, this woman was attacked by sharks and she is being drugged to the bottom of the ocean. And she just told herself she said, I'm not going to die. I am not going to let this shark take my life. And she started punching him in the eye. And then she went limp and he let her go. And she swam to the surface. But she, in her statement, like in the interview afterwards, she says, I just told myself I'm not going to let the shark kill me. I'm not going to die in this water. And she didn't. And she survived. And you see this again and again and again. We have this great survival instinct. We have this great ability to overcome. The catch is, the holdup is that your conscious mind gets stuck in these negative cycles because you think that the past is just going to repeat itself. So you have to think about the past in order to not relive it. But when you start thinking about it, you have to change that mindset and you have to say, what am I going to do next time? How am I going to not let this happen again? How am I going to make the improvement so that I can have a better choice? What do I need to learn in order to make a better choice? And make those steps and move forward and help your brain and your body heal so that you can be happy and healthy and successful and not stuck in that cycle. So, again, the question for today is, how much time do you spend thinking about the past? How often are you thinking of the past? And as you answer that question and you think about it, just take that time to be patient with yourself. And don't let this be a question that gets you stuck in those feelings. When you start to write them down, I know when I made my journal entry and I started to write it down, I was like, yeah, I do think about the past a lot. And I think about, why people did that. And I just reminded myself, you're not going to get a why. And even when you do get a why, it doesn't make sense because it doesn't match up with your perspective. And that can be difficult and that can be challenging. So you just have to let that go. You have to be like, okay, I cannot understand why someone would do that. I can't understand why someone would make that choice. I know I made my choice because this is the information that I had and this is where I was. And I can see that I could have made a better choice, or I can see that I trusted someone I shouldn't have, whatever it may be. And I'm not going to do that again. I'm going to see those warning signs. I'm going to see the cues. I'm going to trust my intuition. I'm going to, whatever it is that you need to do in order to be in a better place next time, then that's the goal that you need to set. And every time that thought comes into your brain, how did I get in this abusive relationship? Well, I didn't see this red flag. That small controlling behavior that starts at the beginning. And I just let that slide and just recognize that, and then when you see that in another person, you're like, oh, she told me I had to do it this way or else. And that's a big thing. That's a big cue. When someone tells you or else, they're not being constructive. They're not, okay, there are things. If you cheat on me, don't cheat on me again or else I'm going to leave you. That's a little different. But if it's like, I don't like that green shirt, you should wear something, if you wear that, I'm going to be upset on you. That kind of thing. That's a red flag. So you see those red flags. Recognize those things. We are taught as children not to go into dark alleys. It's the same kind of principle. So use your memories as a tool to learn for the future. And as they come into your brain, then think about positive things that can come from that. I learned that I should not trust these people. I learned that I should not hang out with homeless people in the park at 13. That is dangerous. I learned that lesson. I can move forward from that lesson. I did not do it again. It was really eye-opening. Because when my mom was like, this is dangerous and you could have gotten really hurt and you're just really lucky. And I was like, I'm fine. They're nice people. Nothing bad happened. And then their faces were on the cover of the newspaper. And they were bad people and they were doing bad things. And it was dangerous. And for me, that was really eye-opening. Like, oh my goodness. Wow. I put myself in a really dangerous situation. I should never do that again. And I did a better job and I stayed safer because of it. So you have to make those choices. You have to make those changes. You have to see that and really change your perspective in order to not punish yourself, but learn from it. So now that my feet are frozen, I hope everybody is having a fantastic day. And don't dwell in the past. Learn from the past. Use it as a tool in order to be successful for the future. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know if you have any questions or comments or want to share a story or something or anything. I always love hearing from everybody, and I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Many blessings. Oh, it's still warm. I was worried it was going to be cold.